Recording in progress.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartrasutrasya bhashyasya kramat vivaranasya cha. We discussed a very important sutra, that is sutra number 30 of the Samadhipada, which deals with most of the distractions that any spiritual seeker may face in his or her life. That is Vyadhi, Sthana, Samsaya, Pramada, Alasya, Avirati, Bhranti Darshana, Alabdha Bhumigatvani, Anavasthitattvani, Chitta Vikshepaha, Te Antarayaha. So they are called Chitta Vikshepa, distractions of the mind, disturbances in the mind. Whenever we step into spiritual life, it could be physical illness, it could be mental difficulties, manifesting in the form of laziness or a tendency to postpone, to procrastinate, or to find false excuses for not doing what we actually want to do. So there are all kinds of distractions. In the next sutra, Patanjali deals with certain other problems that are the natural consequences caused by these 9 distractions. They are 4 in number: dukkha daumanasya angame jayatva swasa praswasaha vikshepa sahabhuvaha. So the literal meaning is they are born along with vikshepa, but actually they are caused by vikshepas. They are the 4 external manifestations of the obstacles that we already discussed in the 30th sutra. Now, perhaps we may come across similar problems in all spiritual traditions. Sometimes they are all together called the dark night of the soul. The problems and obstacles that we have to encounter during the early phase of our spiritual journey, sometimes they may be the direct results of the 5 klishta samskaras or 5 kleshas: avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. Extreme likes, extreme dislikes, which almost take some kind of an obsessive manifestation. And sometimes we know we should get rid of them, but we find ourselves in a helpless situation. And at that time, Patanjali gives this simple remedy, that is Ishvara Pranidhana. Of course, this has been the views of great commentators like Vijnana Bhikshu and others, who give a lot of importance to Ishvara Pranidhana. So when we resign ourselves to a divine will, what happens? We are strengthened, our resources are spiritually reinforced, and we become more capable of facing the problems coming within ourselves. And at that stage, Patanjali is going to discuss very soon, after 2 more sutras, Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, 4 attitudes towards people, events and experiences. That is, you should be friendly with other fellow spiritual seekers. We should be sympathetic with those who may be far behind us in spiritual life. We should not look down upon them, and then we should admire the great saints and sages who are more advanced than us in spiritual life, and then we should keep a long distance from people whose association can create conflicts in our own spiritual journey. Now, so in this context, we should remember in the Yoga Sutra literature, Patanjali uses more than one term to imply something that is more or less the same. So you find Nirbija Samadhi, Asampraඥāta Samadhi, Kaivalyam. Then at the beginning of the Samadhipada, Tada Drashtusurupe Avasthanam. That means all these different names used, Cittavritti Nirodha, that is also implies Sampraඥāta Samadhi, then Kaivalya, the enlightenment discussed in the fourth pada, and all these states, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, mean going beyond all vrittis, all these are more or less similar at the experience level, but when we use the vocabulary of Patanjali's system, you may find some minor differences. That's all. Now we will come to the subject. So this is a very important sutra. Dukkha daumanasya angamejayatva shwasa prashwasaha vikshepa sahabhuvaha. As I mentioned earlier, these are the four external manifestations of the problems that we discussed in the last sutra. So now one after another. Dukkham. Simple meaning is pain or grief. Now, in what way it appears, it manifests in our own mental, psychological life, we will discuss with the help of the commentators. Dukkham is a sorrow, means, so it is frequently discussed in the Vedantic literature and also Yoga literature, means tapatraya, three types of dukkha that we discuss in the Bhashya, when we read the Bhashya, that is Adhyalmika, internal, and then Adhibhautika, caused by external, different creatures, different other living beings, and then Adhidevika, things that are beyond us. So that we discuss. So first is Dukkham, sorrow. The second one is Daumanasya, dejection, anxiety or agitation in the mind caused by some desire, and when that desired object is not fulfilled, we feel a kind of dejection. That's Ichcha Vighadat. That's the idea. Chetasaha Kshobhaka, that is Vyasa's commentary. The dejection, Daumanasya. And the third one is Angamejayatvam. Literally it means shakiness, internal conflicts which cause some kind of external manifestations which are quite visible, which can be strongly felt. According to Vyasa, yat angani ejayati kampayati tad, that which causes our organs to shake, and then which of course the unsteadiness of body senses. Sometimes you find when we are under great stress, when we want to do something, we are not able to attain, it can cause this trembling in the body. Sometimes those of many unfortunate practitioners of pranayama sometimes face this problem. They, by mistake, they ignore the important fact that they have to follow certain disciplines, and they have to learn this under a teacher. They forget that, and they overdo these pranayama exercises, which actually hyperactivates some of the nervous currents in the system, and as a result, perhaps there will be a kind of manic excitement, extreme physical activity and energy, which also will cause sometimes these mind wandering, constant stream of disconnected thoughts. All these frequently happens not only as a result of these antarayas, but also sometimes can be caused by extreme and misguided, unrestrained practices of pranayama techniques, and then of course swasa praswasa means breathing becoming irregular. When we become excited, when we become too much agitated, the breathing system becomes irregular. Now, in this context, we should remember, I would like to discuss the commentary, which is very, very revealing. So I will perhaps discuss Vyasa's own words. I remember, so Vyasa's commentary on the sutra. I'm just reading. Of course, before we read Vyasa's words on Vyasa's commentary on the 31st Sutra, we should remember some of Vyasa's own ideas that he mentioned in his commentary on the 30th Sutra that we discussed earlier. Now, Vyasa says on this sutra in his commentary, that is Dukkha Darumanasya Angamejayatva Swasa Praswasaha. One important point he makes in this commentary is very simple. Ete vikshepa sakabhuvu vikshipta chittasya ete bhavanti. So this is a very important thing. All these problems, the 9 difficulties, obstacles that we discussed in the last session, when we discussed the 30th Sutra, and these 4 external manifestations that we are discussing now, that means pain or sorrow or shakiness of the body, excitement, breathing becoming irregular, all these problems, all these occur to persons who can be called vikshipta chitta, means those whose mind is vikshiptam, mana, mind becomes vikshipta. Vikshipta means moving in one direction and immediately moving in the opposite direction. Sometimes you feel extreme joy and happiness and contentment. After some time, suddenly going back to another state and again coming back. Now, I already discussed this earlier. There are 5 states of mind as explained by Vyasa at the very beginning of Samadhipada. They are Kshiptam, that is restless state, Modam, that is highly stupefied state, the Vikshiptam, distracted, these antarayas and difficulties. 4th one we are not discussing now, Egagram, that is one-pointed, and Niruddha state, where all vrittis are transcended. Niruddha vritti, that is the highest state. So we are not discussing the first 2 and the last 2. We are discussing the 3rd one, which is Vikshipta. This is a natural state in which a devotee, a spiritual seeker may find himself in at the very beginning of his spiritual life. So Vyasa begins his commentary, Bhashyam, Dukkham Adhyatmikam, Adhibaudigam, Adidevigam cha. So first one is Dukkha. The Dukkha is divided into 3 categories, that is Adhyatmikam, Adhibaudigam and Adidevigam. Adhyatmikam, it's caused by bodily disease. For example, Vyadhi can be one problem. When body is sick, it can cause certain problems. That is a problem, it's caused within our own self. And then the next one is Adhibaudigam, caused by others. And then Adidevigam, caused by natural calamities over which we have no control. This COVID and earthquakes, and there are many calamities which are beyond human control. It's called Adidevigam. So then praninaha tad upaghataya prayadande tad dukkham. So certain problems which people face, which all living beings face, which they want to remove, that state of situation is called dukkham. So daurmanasyam ichhabhighatat chedasaka kshopaka. As I mentioned, dejection, mental agony. You have a desire and then that desire is not fulfilled. It can cause inner anxiety, dejection, disappointment, which can interfere when we are trying to meditate or when we are trying to do anything noble. Something very interesting is, very often many of our entertainments are attempts to run away from our internal problems. See, not always, but in many cases, people taking too much interest in, let us say, games, computer games, sports sometimes, or also some other activities. Frequently, of course not all the time, not professionals, but frequently we are trying to run away from something that agitates, that disturbs our mind. So we want to divert our mind into something so that we'll be less disturbed mentally. So we are sometimes trying to run away from ourselves. This is one kind of thing, out of dejection or something. Now, this adhyatmika dukkha can be twofold according to Vyasa. It may be caused by bodily disease, it may be caused by unfulfilled desires. This is one. Again, yad angani ejayati kampayati tat angame jayatum prano yad bahyam vayum achamati iti swasaha yad kaushtyam vayum nissarayati sa praswasaha. So adi bhaudikam, as I mentioned earlier, it could be caused by others, maybe fear of animals, maybe fear of imaginary difficult situations and so on. And then they express themselves in the form of irregular breathing. Now, Vyasa says, Ede vikshepa sahabhuvaha vikshipta chittasya. So all these happen only to persons whose minds are agitated. I mean, they are not able to keep their mind in a state of tranquility. In the coming sutras, very soon, there is a solution given. So two solutions are actually put forward in the Samadhi-bada to face all mental difficulties. One is resignation to God's will. That's what you find in the lives of many mystics of all religious traditions, both Hindu, Christian, Jewish, or maybe Sufi mystics. You find great Buddhist monks, you find this kind of resignation. Buddha, of course, Buddhists did not believe in a created God, but they resigned themselves to a higher ideal, maybe dharma or something like that. So Buddham Sharanam, Dharmam Sharanam, Sangham Sharanam is also a kind of pranidhana, not Ishvara, but it's kind of pranidhana only. Resignation to a higher ideal. So one is Ishvara pranidhana, which is the view according to many commentators like Vijnana Bhikshu and others who are great devotees, who bring in God frequently, very often, bhakti ideal. The second alternate suggestion that Patanjali gives is Ekatattva Abhyasaka. That means you keep a high ideal, Ekatattva, some higher sublime ideal in front of you. And that will reduce a lot of internal and external problems. So this is a very important thing. Sometimes you find people who have made a lot of money, not always through proper means. Sometimes there is a little bit of guilty consciousness. The feeling that perhaps it was not the right means maybe. So you find when they reach a particular stage, they want to dedicate their resources, their efforts to some higher ideal. It could be in the form of starting a trust, and all the extra savings, profits deposited in a big trust to help the Ebola victims or those who are suffering from natural calamities in the backward countries. All these you find. Actually, it is a natural reflex action of the human mind, because you want to sleep a little longer and you want to feel a little less anxious about yourself. So actually it's a very precious thing, to get for at least 6 hours of good sleep, peaceful sleep every day. It is not so easy for a multi-billionaire who may have money, may have piled up money, maybe through some improper channels. So mind will suddenly be pricking from within. So at that time, in fact, this, I don't call it guilt consciousness or anything, maybe too strong a word, but this internal unpleasantness may push them to do certain things, and from which they may derive a great joy. Starting a hospital, library, things like that. It's actually some kind of a reflex action. But Patanjali says ekatattva abhyasa means one great sublime principle, and dedicate all your efforts, mind and thought towards that. It may be you write a big book, you start a big hospital for helping people, or it may a big movement for conservation of nature. You can find many people doing that. Many of them are pushed by their own mental conditions to do that. But it is certainly very sublime, a very admirable way of diverting their resources to something good, something useful for others. So these are two methods that Patanjali system put forward in this context to get rid of these 9 distractions, vyadhis, dhyana, etc., and their 4 external manifestations, dukkha, darumanasya, etc. So that is an important subject. That's why Vyasa he concludes his bhashya by atha ede vikshepaka samadhi pradipakshaka tabhyam eva abhyasa vairagyabhya nirodhavyaha. So you have to get rid of all these problems, means all these distractions which are antagonistic to your peace of mind, to concentration, can be checked. Nirodhavyaha means can be checked by the practice of abhyasa vairagya. And in the commentaries you find great commentators like Vijnana Bhikshu says the Ishvara Pranidhana is one great method. Suddenly you find many mystics, this sudden change. St. Francis was a soldier, and in fact, St. Paul was certainly not a great lover of Christians before he actually became one. So you can imagine. So all these things happen. So this sudden transformation. Of course, we have to remember this. All these problems occur to persons whose minds are vikshipta, means wavering. Of course, there are 5 states, Vyasa says, kshiptam, modham, vikshiptam, egagram, niruddhamidi, chitta bhumayeha, tatra vikshipte chetasi, vikshepavarjaniya buddha. So he says, those who are restless, stupefied, incapable of doing anything, they may not face these problems because they don't have the mental sensitivity to be aware of their problems. I mean, they are so deep into this problem that they are not even aware of these problems. But those who reach a 3rd state, vikshipta state, they are aware of these problems and they want to get rid of these problems. So you can see in this context a few important flashlights you get from Vijnana Bhikshu, who is the author of Yoga Bhashya Vartikam. So he says, न केवलमेते व्याधादयो योगान्तरायः अपि तु दुःखादिरूपेषु antarayantareshu api bhavadityaha. So he says, all these pain, all these problems arise for vikshepa, for vikshipta chittas, and they are caused by these 9 antarayas. Of course, atmanam susanghadam adhikritya vartande idi adhyatmikam tacha dividam shariram manasam cha. So adhyatmika dukkha, internal, means one is physical, the other is mental. Physical problems may be due to disease, and mental problems may be due to disease of mind, that is desire. That's what this is. So just as bad food makes our body sick, so also bad thoughts, undesirable, unpleasant mental conditions make our mind also sick. That's why he says, manasam kamadijam devanadhirti jayade iti daivikam adi daivikam sidoshna adi uttamityarthaka. So certain problems due to global warming, of course in modern times we know it's partly caused by human beings, but before the industrial age, maybe 2000 years back, they could not perhaps anticipate to what extent human beings can try to destroy themselves. So in those days, people didn't have the scientific technological equipment to do harm to themselves to the extent that they have got today. Today, all the science and technology have equipped modern man to do maximum damage to himself, to the earth where he is living. So that's why you find in ancient times, great scholars like Patanjali, Vijnana Bhikshu and others, they thought these diseases are not caused by human beings, they are caused by some transcendental celestial beings, like this COVID for example. It can, technically it belongs to Adi Devika, if you take the old perspective. But today we know it is not necessarily a creation of some transcendental natural forces. It is the creation of human beings themselves. So you can see this deforestation, global warming, all these are some of the examples where human beings, I mean, Adhyatmika dukkha and Adidevika dukkha are intertwined in modern times. So now we will come to the next sutra, as I mentioned earlier. Now, tat pradishedhartham ekatattva abhyasa kartavya. That is the 32nd sutra. That is to confront these problems. Problems like disease, indecision, carelessness, sloth, sensuality, all these problems, antarayas, obstacles, which are listed in the 30th sutra, and their external manifestations, which are listed in the 31st sutra. Tat pradishedhartham means to confront those problems, to block those 9 obstacles, and therefore consequences, what we should do, viksheva pradeshedhartham, that's the meaning. Tat here means viksheva pradeshedhartham, to confront, to get rid of these problems. What we should do is ekatattva abhyasaha, kartavyaha should be added. So one word should be added at the beginning, viksheva pradeshedhartham, and another word should be added at the end, abhyasa kartavya, should be practiced. I mean, ekatattva abhyasaha should be practiced, kartavyaha. I mean, so I should remember, please remember, ekatattva abhyasa is mentioned here. Ishvara pranidhana was mentioned earlier in the Sadhanapada, and also in the Sadhanapada first sutra at the beginning, the primary stage of Ishvara Pranidhana. And the advanced stage of Ishvara Pranidhana was mentioned earlier, Ishvara Pranidhana Dva and Ekatattva Abhyasa. These are two solutions. In a way, they have a universal application. There are many people who are good people, highly refined, cultured, well-meaning people, but who may not go to a temple or a church or a place of worship. And they don't mind reading great books, but they won't do any harm to anybody. They can practice Ekatattva Abhyasa, and we find many great men and women doing that. Sometimes you find people who are suffering serious terminal diseases, maybe also great internal problem, losing a lot of money in the bank, whole industry collapsing, and immediately they take to some philanthropical activities. Great men and women you find. Actually, it is an example of the natural impulsive practice of Ekatattva Abhyasa. I mean, diverting our attention and focusing on some sublime ideal. That is, Ekatattva means one great ideal, one great principle, one great goal. I mean, dedicating all our efforts, resources, efficiency, all for doing something good and great for others and making it as a great ideal in front of us and diverting all our thoughts and problems, everything in that direction. So you find all the vikshepas gone. They're happy. They be worried about the way their philanthropical activities are progressing or not. But that worry is a different kind of worry. That's something very important. Suppose you are running a great philanthropical activity, maybe doing work, doing philanthropical activity in some backward countries, fighting Ebola, fighting some kind of serious pandemic or epidemics, and you feel worried and concerned. That concern, that worry will not have such a disturbing effect on the mind. But if you lose all the money in the bank, you go and commit suicide. People do that frequently. So these are two different kinds of worries. If you can worry about doing something for others, that worry doesn't crush you mentally. In fact, there is a great joy in worrying about doing something good for others. There's something. If you can worry about doing something good, there is a great joy in that kind of worry. But you're worrying about some terrible things happen in your own personal, selfish work or activity, that worry, it bites you, it crushes your mind, and it leaves as a mental wreck. So these are two kinds of worries. That's why worry is sublimated. Problems are sublimated. Anxieties are sublimated. That's the relevance of this sutra. Tat pradishedhartham ekatattva abhyasa. Vajaspati, as I mentioned, in Tattva Vaisharati, he says this ekatattva abhyasa is only Ishvara Pranidhana. He gives only one meaning. But according to Vijnana Bhikshu, it could be Ishvara Pranidhana or maybe some higher ideal. Bhoja makes it a very, very simple principle. He says, Kasminschit abhipside tattve. That is ekatattve. Kasminschit abhipside tattve. Abhipsida means some higher goal, higher object, higher ideal that you like, that you admire, that you appreciate, and you focus all your energies in that direction. So, this is the relevance of this ekatattva abhyasa. And the 33rd sutra we already discussed many times in different contexts. It is supposed to be one of the most psychologically relevant and helpful sutras in the Patanjali system. That is Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekshanam, sukha dukkha punya punya vishayanam bhavanataka chitta prasadanam. So this is a very important sutra. So I already mentioned earlier, Maitri means a friendly feeling. When you meet somebody, you may meet somebody in the airport, in the library or anywhere, and happen to have a discussion on your spiritual life, and suddenly you find he's also a spiritual seeker like you, and if you have a conversation with fellow spiritual seekers, you find suddenly exchange of views and ideas will reinforce our own conviction and will be helpful in our own spiritual journey. That is Maitri. So we may not be able to associate only with people who are fellow spiritual seekers. We may have to confront people who may be totally different from others, but that one should try to meet and associate with like-minded people who are spiritual seekers. Karuna, as I mentioned, sympathy. Sympathy here means a kind of friendly feeling towards those who may be less fortunate than most of us, and we should be friendly and helpful to them. Mudita, again appreciation, admiration towards those who may be spiritually much more advanced than us. Contempt for those who are less advanced than us, and jealousy towards those who are more advanced than us. Both are equally disturbing, and both are obstacles to the development of Chitta Prasada. What is Chitta Prasada? Chitta, as we know, mind, intellect, the memory system, and the sense of I awareness, the Antakarana we call in Vedanta. That is the real implication, the word Chittam, according to Vijnana Bhikshu and other commentators. Though normally we can say, for convenience, we can say the mental system, we can say, mental system, which includes all this. Now, when we want to find our mind to be friendly to ourselves, then we feel a kind of, we want to be at peace with ourselves. And in order to be at peace with our own mind, we should make sure that we don't feed our mind with bad food. You know, if you have a pet dog, if it gives bad food, it may bite you sometimes. Even the friendliest of dogs can. If you constantly feed it bad, harmful food, it can do harm to others. But if you feed it with good food, it will be friendly with you. So mind is also like that. So mind should be given good food, and then mind will be our best friend. Otherwise, mind may not be our friend. So when our mind is really our friend, then mind will not remind you of its own existence. Like body. When does our body remind you of its existence? When you are sitting somewhere immersed in reading a great book or contemplation, if you are not aware of your body, it means you don't have very serious illness. If you have a stomach pain, then mind reminds you, look here, I am here. If you have a headache, mind is reminding you of its existence. So when body. When body doesn't remind you of its existence, it means body is certainly very healthy, very friendly. So also mind, the same thing. Mind becomes anxious because there is a problem in the mind. When you don't worry about anything, mind is peaceful. There is no problem in the mind. So also body. Both mind and body in this respect are identical. So in that state, you call your body is at peace with yourself, your mind is at peace with yourself. That state of mind is called Chitta Prasada. Chitta Prasada is to be understood at two different levels. Chitta Prasada, which is the highest state of the Viveka Khyadi, Viveka, higher wisdom, which is the result of Kaivalyam, which is again the result of Samprajnada or Asamprajnada Samadhi, which is the result of Chitta Vritti Nirodha, etc. It is the highest state of Chitta Prasada, where you won't be shaken by disturbed by anything. But there is another kind of Chitta Prasada at the ordinary experience level. In normal days, when we are at peace with ourselves, tranquility, calm and quiet, without feeling any anxiety within, that state also is called Chitta Prasada. But that's an ordinary state of the experience of inner tranquility, peace and contentment. For experiencing that kind of inner peace and contentment, you should know how to deal with different situations, different persons, different events, and different episodes that we may have to encounter in our everyday life. We may meet people who are like us, Maitri, we may meet people who may be less advanced than ourselves in spiritual life, Karuna, sympathy, and we may meet people who are more advanced than Mudita, that is, admiration or appreciation. Fourth category is Upeksha, indifference. About Mudita, there is another psychological element involved in this. Why Patanjali says we must appreciate people when we meet somebody, when we meet them and who are spiritually more advanced, we should not become jealous of them. We should rather appreciate them. When you appreciate a great good quality in others, indirectly you are inheriting those qualities. You are developing those qualities. This is a very interesting thing. When we admire something in others, indirectly we are opening our own mind to develop those very qualities that we find in other people. When we become jealous, what happens? Then we will be losing our own good qualities. So they work in two different directions. That's why Mudita is very, very important. The fourth one is Upeksha, indifference. People with wrong attitudes can perhaps disturb our own spiritual life. They can cause doubts, conflicts. We may start thinking, getting anxious about whether we are actually following the right path or not. So all these things can happen. That's why it is important to keep a long distance with people whose association can create problems in our mind. In modern times or even ancient times, we cannot physically keep a distance from people using this kind of judgment. We should not become judgmental. Patanjali is actually placing before us a tool, a method to remain in a state of internal peace, which everyone values very much. So that's an important thing. How to remain in a state of inner tranquility and peace. So if we don't take care to be friendly with fellow spiritual seekers, if we become indifferent towards them, then we are losing our opportunity to spiritually reinforce our own convictions, our own spiritual life. So we should be friendly with them. If we become contemptuous, if we look down upon those who are less advanced than us, instead of karuna, sympathy, if we become too proud of our own progress or our own status, then really it will disturb our mind. And then if we don't admire and appreciate great and higher qualities in others, then also the same problem can happen. Because if you don't have appreciation, then you have the opposite of it. And we may not feel like appreciating something great and good in others. and that can disturb our mind. So that problem should be avoided. Now the fourth one is upeksha, indifference. Indifference doesn't mean keeping away, hostility or antagonism or contempt, nothing of the kind. You develop a kind of internal mental filtering mechanism by mentally keeping out all wrong ideas invading our own mind, disturbing our own mind. Physically we cannot keep a distance from anybody like that. It's not out of contempt, not at all. This is prescribed for a beginner who has not yet attained Viveka Khyadi, higher spiritual progress. It's only for a beginner. Sri Ramakrishna says in the Gospel, if you sow a seed, it becomes a plant, and a plant, when it grows, maybe it will be destroyed by cattle. So you have to erect a fence around the plant to protect it from cattle. Otherwise, it will be plant will be eaten by cattle. Or you should have some kind of protection around. When it becomes a tree, then you can tie an elephant on that tree. You don't need any fence any longer. Like that, when we become spiritually advanced, then we have no problem. But before that, during the early phase of our spiritual journey, we should protect our own mind. For that, we should evolve a kind of filtering mechanism. I would sometimes think, in modern times, in this age of internet, information technology, when at one click you get every kind of good and bad informations and views and visions and sounds, everything is available in your own small little room at one click. So children in schools can be taught to develop a kind of internal filtering mechanism. Technology is a wonderful blessing to humanity. It is a wonderful blessing. It's a great opportunity. It has done so much to make our life more comfortable, more happy, no doubt about it. But technology also can become a poison. Internet can be a poison. It can spread a lot of self-destructive ideas, all around. So students can be taught to develop a kind of internal filtering mechanism to make proper use of technology. Technology should not use us. We should use technology. We should not be used by technology, but we should be able to use technology. Technology cannot teach us how to, it cannot give us the wisdom to make proper use of it. That technology cannot provide. Technology can provide us comfort, power, and many things, of course, knowledge, all these. But it cannot give us a knowledge how to properly make use of technology, how to handle it, how to manage it. For that we need a higher tool. So in our ordinary life, this spiritual filtering mechanism, psychological filtering mechanism will be very useful for everyone. Actually, Patanjali has exhausted all possible human life situations in these 4 options: Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha. These are 4 tools that we can use when we encounter different situations in our everyday life. And he says, and now the mind attain that the bhavanataka vishaya sukha dukkha punya vishayanam bhavanataka chitta prasadana. Means mind can attain tranquility and peace only by cultivating these 4 qualities: friendliness, compassion, appreciation, admiration, and indifference towards happiness, sorrow, virtue, that is those who are more advanced than us, and also indifference towards vice. Indifference means neither coming in close contact with the wrong ideal, not fighting with it. We cannot fight with something that is bad. That also will bring us into contact with it. So neither coming close nor deliberately running away from it, keeping it at bay, means being indifferent. So that is the only way we can try to attain peace and tranquility in everyday life. Of course, Bhoja writes in his Rajamartanda, for example, this is a famous statement, Sutre Sukha Dukkadi Shabdehi Taddantaha Pradibaditaha. That's Bhoja says, that by happiness, sorrow, virtue and evil, Bhoja says, are meant by people. Happy people, suffering people, virtuous people and evil people. That is Bhoja, Rajamartanda says, Bhoja's work Rajamartanda says. Chitta Prasadanam, according to Vyasa, it means clarity of mind. The clarity of mind means when the mind is at peace with itself, when mind doesn't have any internal conflict with itself. When such a mind is at peace with itself, that mind will be our best friend. How do we judge our own mind? When we try to do something that we know to be for our own good, our mind appreciates, helps you, encourages you. When our mind is not at peace with itself, when it is not our friend, then your mind suddenly tries to take you away from doing something that you know to be good for yourself. It's just like human being. If a friend gives you good advice, he's a real friend. If a friend tries to give bad advice, he's certainly not our best friend. So like that, mind also becomes like that. The sthiti nibandhini, that is of course Vijnana Bhikshu has many more things to say about this. We'll discuss this in the next sutra. Now we can go for interaction. Thank you. Namaskar. Yeah.
Pranam Maharaj.
Namaskar. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you about one of the yamas. It's in of course, in the preceding chapter.
Yeah.
And this one has to do with, and I know there's a Sanskrit name for it, but it's written, when the yogi is established in non-receiving, he gets memory of past life. I'm not so concerned about
aparigraha. Yeah. So ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. Aparigraha means non-receiving. So according to yoga psychology, when you go on receiving things from others, you also receive a little bit of the mental, the psychological conditions of the giver. So, to put it in a more straightforward language, where I will put in different contexts. Suppose you give, you help a number of persons around you in a neighborhood. A little bit of the spiritual merits, very good karmas, good karma phalas, the results of the good karmas, you will inherit. It will come to you unconsciously. That is the principle accepted in yoga, Vedanta, and also in Buddhism, Jainism, all these things. If you go on helping others, you find why you feel a great peace of mind when you do something good for others. Some of the good punya means good karma phalas of others will be transferred to your account, your karma account. And simultaneously, you may have unfortunately, some negative karma phalas also in your account. That will be transferred to the account of those who receive help from you. I shall illustrate this with an example. In ancient times, you find in Oriental tradition, this in Hinduism, in Buddhism, and so on, also Oriental traditions. And also you find in Catholic tradition, they honor nuns and monks. They consider that they should give alms to these wandering monks. You can find in the medieval Europe, the Franciscans and Dominicans, the friars used to move from place to place. I am giving this example from the Christian context because many of you must have heard of this in Western world. But in India, in Oriental countries, among Buddhist traditions, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh and Jain traditions, this kind of showing hospitality to men and women of renunciation was considered to be an auspicious thing to do. The reason is, when you do that, some of your negative karma phalas will be taken by them, but they can absorb them because they are spiritually advanced people. It will not affect them. And some of their good spiritual qualities will be transferred to your karma account. This one. So this is the central principle. We cannot verify this, but we can verify at the psychological level. To give an example, if you go on doing something very good for others for many years, you feel a great peace of mind. You may be helping people who may not be aware of the fact that you are the one helping them. They may not know that you are helping them. And you do not know whom you are helping, but something happens to your mind and you feel, how do you feel that you are spiritually being benefited? You feel calmness, tranquility and peace. As I give the example of big philanthropical organizations suddenly emerging all of a sudden with the efforts of great captains of industry. I give this example. So aparigraha means non-receiving of gifts. It is through constant practice of aparigraha, your negative karmas get completely emptied. So your mind becomes calm and quiet. At that time, you should be able to remember the past, previous days, everything. That's the idea. Just as a lake, all the outer layers are removed, you are able to see the rock bottom or mental lake, like that.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. There is a statement in the Hindu tradition that is asammana tapo vriddhi sammana hi tapakshaya. I can explain this. It's a very important point. Asammana tapo vriddhi sammana hi tapakshaya. What it means is, if a person gets honored everywhere, slowly he will become a pauper, because by getting honor from everyone, he has distributed all his spiritual wealth to so many people who have honored him. That's why a spiritual person should continue doing spiritual practices to preserve a good amount of spiritual wealth with him. And sammana hi tapakshaya asammana tapavriddhi. If people dishonor you, then you know what happens. Their papas, negative karmas will come to you, and you will not lose your positive because they have not honored you. So if you dishonor a good person, a spiritual person, it is a dangerous thing to do. If you honor a spiritual person, it is an auspicious thing to do. If you honor, it is something auspicious. If you dishonor, you may you may find facing some maybe unpleasant consequences. So that is a central principle why these wandering monks, you can find this as a great illustration. Sometimes I try to give some illustrations from Western religious landscape to make the example more vivid to Western listeners. In Russian Orthodox tradition, if you read a book like The Way of a Pilgrim, that pilgrim, he travels from one place to another place. That's true in the mid 19th century Russia, not a very pleasant place to live in those days. Now, this pilgrim wanders from place to place, and sometimes he's invited to their homes by rich people. He is treated with great honor, and they gather around him. They ask the pilgrim to pray for them, and eventually when he leaves, they give him some money. He doesn't accept it. He accepts only some dry ham or something. You can find. You read Mr. French's translation of The Way of a Pilgrim, you can find. And the pilgrim continues the journey. The most vivid illustration that I have found in Christian mystical tradition comes from this Way of a Pilgrim. I mean, the pilgrim is honored by householders. He is traveling from one place to another place on his way to Jerusalem. He wanted to learn the Jesus prayer. So you can find this. And giving this example, as I mentioned, in Indian tradition, this is a very common thing. Swami Vivekananda, in 1886 onwards, in 1886, Sri Ramakrishna passed away. From 1886 to 1893 May, Vivekananda, the great monk, was traveling all over India, and you can see his picture. Only some clothes, rough clothes, and a big stick. He was a wandering monk, traveling all the way from one end of the country to the other end, including today's Pakistan. He went to Karachi, Lahore, and all that. And he was received by people from different walks of life. He was the guest of kings and princes, and also very, very ordinary people who received him in their huts. So you can see. So this is a tradition in India. Any monk, any spiritual person should be honored, should be treated with great hospitality and reverence. A glimpse of this you will find in The Way of a Pilgrim. That's why I quoted that book. I refer to that book. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you, Maharaj.
Maharaj, there's a question. In earlier lectures, you talked about extreme dispassion or vairagya. So my question is that at what stage in human life one should be practicing extreme dispassion? Because if you look at the Hindu lifestyle, we have brahmacharya, grahast, sannyas, vanaprastha and sannyas. But in early stages, there is so much struggle in life to survive. One has to be very passionate about survival. And if he is not passionate, then it's contradicting. Yeah. So just wanted to get clarity on this. Why people at the older age get more attracted to extreme passion, not in early stage.
Yeah, I know. This extreme vairagya, extreme dispassion, this extreme renunciation, it is not something that you practice. It is something that you attain as a result of your own spiritual evolution. See, Buddha was not practicing vairagya when he left his kingdom and confessed. What he was doing, he had reached a stage in his spiritual evolution where he found living in a palace with all the comforts and luxury was something that he was not ready to do. He would not have tolerated that great luxurious life as a prince of a kingdom, a son of a king. So, remember, householders or normal people were not asked to practice the extreme dispassion, not at all. The Vairagya was not enforced on everyone. It will be a calamity, and it will be against the social progress. It may even it may put a society in a state of imbalance if extreme renunciation becomes an enforced ideal. Never. It is a state where a person actually reaches as a part of his own evolution. So, Vairagya for the normal householder is, it means you make money, wealth, everything through proper dharmic means. You know, there are 4 purusharthas in Hindu tradition: dharma, artha, kama and moksha. Dharma is the central principle that should guide you in your pursuit of artha and kama. Artha means the means, wealth, money, all these that are needed for fulfilling your normal requirements in life. Kama means the normal requirements. A householder should make wealth, should generate wealth. I tell you, there are statements in the Smriti literature. Yajnavalkya Smriti, incidentally, is a very important document. It's a kind of constitutional document which gives elaborate descriptions of the signs, the laws guiding property distribution in a family structure. Women should be given 1% Dayakrama, the particular section of Yajnavalkya Smriti. So, many of the Smriti literature, they emphasize the idea every householder should strive to generate wealth for the sustenance of his family, his children, his wife, and the kingdom. And you should pay taxes, then only the kingdom will prosper. And he should generate enough wealth to look after his family, children, and others. Not only that, if an householder who has a responsibility to his family and children, if that person practices extreme dispassion and renunciation, that householder is an atharmi. He's against dharma. I cannot explain this more forcefully than giving an illustration from Sri Ramakrishna's life. You find Sri Ramakrishna was living Dakshineshwar, and he was thinking of God, meditating on God right from his birth. For him, this worldly life was something non-existent. That Sri Ramakrishna was living Dakshineshwar, always in Samadhi and all that. Now there was another gentleman who used to stay outside his room, and he pretended to be a greater mystic, spreading a big this deer skin and sitting there with Rudraksha, all the vibhudis, and they pretend to be a great mystic. But you know what he was doing? And also he was trying to get a little money from some rich visitors who were coming to the Dakshineshwar. So now there was a problem with this man. His name is Azra, Padachandra Azra. This man had his wife, children and parents living in their homes who were suffering, who didn't have anyone else to look after them. And this man had come to this Dakshineshwar instead of looking for a job, generating money and wealth to look after his children and family. This man has come to the Dakshineshwar. Sri Ramakrishna scolded him, asked him, go and look after your wife and children. Sri Ramakrishna did not appreciate this man's external demonstration of renunciation. So this is a very important point. So you can find these teachings in the Gita also, which will, if you want, you can ask again. I shall give example from Gita. Now the point is, in Hindu tradition, an householder should practice artha and kama. He should generate wealth, he should generate money and all the resources necessary to look after his wife and children and his parents and and if he has more wealth, then he should help his distant cousins and also poor people in the village. So this is a very important principle to remember. Great dispassion and renunciation were never recommended for normal householders. So for them, internal renunciation, they should work hard. Maybe they can start a big multinational, become a billionaire, do great work for others, start a big foundation. Everything they should do. And then internally they can practice renunciation, not externally. How do you practice renunciation internally? You make all the wealth, but you live a simple life. You use this wealth for the good of others. That is internal renunciation. An householder was not expected to practice external renunciation. If an householder, he practices external renunciation, he leaves his children, parents, and others live behind and live in a forest, he is adharmi, it is against dharma. Remember, this is a very important principle, remember. Even now, this what you call Chadurvidha Purushartha, Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha, these four values, very integrated, comprehensive value system that should guide every person. This was somehow eroded by the spread of Buddhism, because Buddhism during the early phase of its development was essentially a monastic institution. We should remember, not later. The early phase of the evolution of Buddhism, which of course happened in India, it became obsessed with monasticism. So that actually influenced Hinduism also. So people really forgot the real teachings of Gita and the Smritis. So all the Smritis you find, Manusmriti, Yajnasamriti, Parasasmriti, Vyasasmriti, all the Smritis are unanimous. An householder should do his duty, and his duty includes generating wealth through proper means. Artha and Kama, the pursuit of Artha and Kama should be guided by Dharma. That's the idea behind it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Swamiji, namaskar.
Namaskar.
I had a question. When we talk about Eka Tattva Abhyasa,
Yeah. Eka Tattva Abhyasa.
When we talk about that, does it lead to Ekagraha and eventually Samyama? If so, what is the difference between Ekagraha and Samyama?
You mean Ekagrata and Samyama. You know,
Ekagraha.
Not Eka. No, not Ekagraha. Ekagrata. Here it means Tat Pradishedhartham Ekatattva Abhyasaka. Ekatattva means one great ideal. That's the meaning of Ekatattva. Tattva means one great principle, one great ideal. As I mentioned earlier, there are two methods for confronting the obstacles called antarayas and their consequences. One is complete resignation to God, the prapatya saranagati. That is the why, you know, that is this is defined by Vaishnava philosophers like Ramanuja and others. You know, Anugulyasya sankalpaka pradigulyasya vardhanam rachusridhi vishwasa goptrutta varanam tatha atma niksheba karpanne shadvidha saranagati. Mean complete resignation to God, to always have positive ideas about God and full conviction that God will protect you, and complete resignation and so on. Now, this is one. The other one is Ekatattva Abhyasa. Ekatattva means one great principle. Abhyasa means practicing this devotion to one great ideal. Either completely resigning everything, surrendering everything to God, then also you will be free from distractions. Because even if you have problems, oh, I have this illness, it may be God's will. So problem is God. If you lose money, if there is a collapse of the bank or stock exchange, it's God's will. Still you work hard, you don't run away from it, you do everything, still if the result doesn't come, God's will. So the moment you bring in this surrender idea, then a huge weight is lifted off your shoulders and you become calm and quiet. This is one, Ishvara Pranidhana. The other one is you direct all your actions, thoughts, and all your resources in order to fulfill one great ideal. That also will give you a one-pointedness. And when your mind gets one-pointed, it will be less distracted. You won't feel distraction. So you should remember the real Ekatattva Abhyasa. Abhyasa means practicing, repeating, constant practicing of what? This kind of dedicating, devoting all your actions and resources, thoughts, everything to one idea. So these are two means to fight distractions. This is what I indicated. I don't know, so please remember, when you can read this sutras in any, you can get a book and that will be helpful to you. Thank you.
Okay, Swami.
Yeah.
Namaskar Maharaj.
Namaskar.
I was thinking about the historical arc of the Maitri concept. When we meet Buddhist adherents and speakers on metta, they are often meditating on that. But when we look at Maitri as it's expounded by Patanjali, we also see things from the spirit of the Upanishads, especially the very final chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad, where it appears that this concept of goodwill, cheerful attitude, support, solidarity with everything, with everyone and everything, is essential.
Yeah.
And it's elaborated on with greater specificity and applicability here by Patanjali, but it does seem to be a very persistent concept in all the Indic spiritual traditions.
Yeah. In the Upanishads and in maybe Buddhist meditative practices, this Maitri has got a much more profound significance. Here, in this particular 33rd Sutra, Maitri means a state of an attitude of friendliness towards fellow spiritual seekers as a means to avoid distractions that can happen in our mind. It is just a tool that we use in our everyday encounter with people of different types. We may meet people who may be just like us, may be different from us. So these interactions, maybe discussions with different types of people with different temperaments can cause distractions in the mind. So it has a much less profundity in here. Here it is just as a method of interacting with people in our everyday life situations, in the office, in modern context, in the office, in the workplace, wherever we meet people of different types. We must try as far as possible to interact with people who are spiritual seekers like ourselves. It is not taken as an attitude towards everyone in the world. That kind of Maitri Bhava, that kind of solidarity or oneness, that is a higher state of Advaitic experience. Where when you become a spiritually enlightened person like a Buddha could practice this Maitri even with Angulimala. He was a demon whose hobby was to cut off the fingers of people whom he met in the forest. And when Buddha was moving in that direction, people warned him. Buddha didn't bother. He continued his journey. So Angulimala came with his sword. He came to attack Buddha, but he could not reach Buddha. And now this is how the story goes. And then when Buddha turned back, this man was completely transformed. That state of Buddha is this higher state of equality, seeing the same Brahman everywhere. In the Upanishad, it means very great sages. They see the same, in the Gita it says, Surisaiva Sopakeja Pandita Samadarshinaha. I mean, a Pandita means here not a scholar, it means a person who has realized the supreme spiritual identity with the entire creation. He sees such a great spiritual person, a mystic, he sees the same Brahman, the same Atman in everything and everywhere. That is the highest state of spiritual enlightenment, spiritual realization. You can find this oneness, the unity of vision, the oneness. I mean, looking upon the entire creation as non-different from ourselves and also the same manifestation of the divine. That is a very high state of spiritual realization of Jiva Brahmaikyam, what do you call it, liberated soul, I mean Jivan Mukta. Here, Patanjali doesn't go that far. Here it is recommended as a tool that you can use when you interact with people, because your interaction with various people with different temperaments can cause distractions, antarayas, that we discussed in 30th Sutra and 31st Sutra. You can actually, our encounter with people with different temperaments, conflicting temperaments, can create a lot of problems in our mind. So how to confront this for a beginner? So he says, all right, when you meet with people who are like you, be friendly with them. And as far as possible, limit your contact with people like yourself. And when you meet somebody who is not so advanced, be sympathetic. And keep a long distance from people who may disturb you. That is not necessary for a Buddha. Buddha could straight away confront Angulimala. This is an important thing. But everyone cannot do that. So, for an advanced soul, this sutra doesn't apply. This is primarily meant for a practitioner during his initial stage of practice. That's all. Yeah.
So we're to understand these as behavioral tools.
Yeah, that's a Chitta Prasada. Even Chitta Prasadanam here is not the highest state of Nirodha Samadhi or anything. Here it is to keep our mind in a state of tranquility. Otherwise, be distracted. So this sutra should be understood in the context of the 30th sutra. How to get rid of these antarayas, these distractions. Practice this. That's all. This can be a wonderful advice which every responsible parent can give, mother or father can give to her or his children. This is a wonderful advice which anyone can give. Maybe this should be taught in schools. When you meet good people, be friendly with them. If you meet somebody who is scored less marks, small, inferior grade, don't make fun of him. If you find somebody who is high grade, appreciate. And if somebody tells you don't study, the education has no meaning, keep a long distance. This every parent, every mother or father can advise a child when he or she goes to school. Simple advice for encountering our everyday life situations. That's the only significance of this 33rd Sutra. Of course, if you can stretch it beyond that, but immediate relevance only this much. That's all.
Yes, I see what you're saying. The universal applicability is there, but I early on I misunderstood Upeksha as and you explained that during the class tonight.
Yeah.
But that's perfect for children.
Yeah.
Because it's so often the case that young people come home to their parents and say, so and so bothered me, and I'm really upset about so and so. And what does the parent usually say? Leave them alone.
Yeah, that's
Just
it.
stay away from them.
It is simple common sense. Simple common sense. This sutra is simple common sense. Children, oh, don't worry, it's natural. Children will play. He called me this name. Oh, don't worry, it's natural. So that's what they do. But don't fight with him unnecessarily. You concentrate on your studies.
Exactly. Thank you, Mama.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you. And especially those who ask questions that gives me a chance to explain more elaborately what I might have left out. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Pranam.
Recording stopped.
Namaskar. Namaskar.